My name is Junita Van Tassel. I'm 29 years old. On March 7th, 2026, my father burst into the bridal suite and said, "If you marry that worthless HVAC guy, I will not walk you down the aisle. I refuse to let you embarrass the entire Van Tassel name." He slammed the door and walked out. 200 guests were already seated inside the church. My sister stood silent in the hallway. I was left completely alone in my wedding dress. What my father didn't know was that the man he had erased from our lives for 24 years had just arrived at the side entrance. That knock on the door a few minutes later changed everything. Before I continue, if this story already hits close to home, if you've ever been abandoned or looked down on by your own family, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, to something my father had been building for longer than I realized. I met Caleb Hartley in the spring of 2024 at a community meeting about making affordable housing more energy efficient. I was there representing the nonprofit I work for, Alliance for Affordable Housing. I'd been their senior grant writer for 5 years at that point, writing funding proposals for housing projects across Raleigh and the surrounding counties. Caleb was there to present on HVAC solutions. He wasn't what I expected. Most contractors who came to these meetings talked at the communities we served. Caleb pulled up a chair next to an elderly woman in the front row and asked her about her electric bills first. Asked what rooms got too hot in summer, too cold in winter. Listened more than he spoke. I noticed his work boots under the conference table before I noticed anything else about him. Tan leather, well-worn, the kind of boots that came from actual job sites, not from a mall trying to look rugged. After the meeting, he handed me his business card. Hartley Climate Solutions, it read. Owner and founder. "You actually own the company," I said. 6 years now. Started with just me in a van. Now we've got 28 people. He said it matter of fact, not bragging. "If your organization ever needs HVAC assessments for grant applications, we do them at cost for nonprofits." I called him 3 days later, professionally at first. By June, it wasn't professional anymore. The first time I brought Caleb to dinner with my father was mid-June 2024. My father had insisted on meeting him. "Anyone you're serious about," he'd said on the phone, "needs to pass through the family. Vincent Van Tassel is a managing partner at Van Tassel & Reed, a corporate law firm with 35 attorneys in downtown Raleigh. He'd built that firm from the ground up after law school, worked 80-hour weeks for 2 decades, made his name representing mid-sized companies in contract disputes and mergers. He wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent. He drove a black Mercedes that he replaced every 3 years like clockwork. When Caleb said, 'I own an HVAC company,' the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. My father's face went carefully blank. "HVAC, that's air conditioning repair?" "Design, installation, and maintenance of climate control systems," Caleb corrected, polite but firm. "Residential and commercial. We just signed a contract with Wake County Hospital System to upgrade their building automation controls." "How nice." "Sho," my father cut his steak with surgical precision. "And you went to college for this?" "Trade school. Then 8 years working for other companies before I started my own." The rest of dinner was my father asking questions designed to expose what he saw as Caleb's inadequacy. How much did trade school cost? Whether Caleb owned or rented his home? What kind of retirement planning he'd done? Each question wrapped in the veneer of fatherly concern, but I could hear the true agenda underneath. What my father was really asking was, "Are you good enough for my daughter?" And the answer he'd decided on before Caleb even walked through the door was no. We made it through dessert. Barely. My father excused himself early, claiming a work call. I found out later he'd sat in his car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. He hadn't had a call. He just couldn't stand to sit at the table anymore. Over the next year and a half, my father's disapproval hardened into something colder. When Caleb proposed to me in December 2025, on a Saturday morning in his workshop, with my grandmother's ring he'd spent 3 months tracking down through estate sales, I called my father from the parking lot to tell him. "I hope you know what you're doing," was all he said. Then he hung up. The engagement dinner was worse. My father showed up 30 minutes late, sat at the head of the table, listened to Caleb talk about our wedding plans for exactly 15 minutes, then stood up. "I'm not feeling well," he announced. "Junita, we'll talk later." He left cash on the table to cover his untouched meal and walked out. My sister Sloane sat frozen in her chair, her husband Preston gripping her hand. Caleb's parents looked at each other with the kind of confusion people have when they've just witnessed something socially inexplicable. I knew it wasn't about feeling well. It was about control, about refusing to give his blessing, about making sure everyone at that table understood his position. 2 days later, my father called. "I won't be contributing to the wedding." "Dad, I didn't ask you to." "Your grandfather would have hated this." His voice was tight, controlled. "He built everything from nothing. He would have wanted you to aim higher than this." The mention of my grandfather stopped me cold. I barely remembered Raymond Van Tassel. He died when I was 5. Or that's what I'd been told all my life. I had fragments of memory, big hands that smelled like machine oil, a workshop with tools hanging on pegboards, him teaching me to count using bolts and washers lined up on a workbench. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. His hand guiding mine. The funeral had been small, a memorial service actually. My father had explained that my grandfather wanted to be cremated immediately, very private, no viewing. There had been an urn on a table at the front of the room. I remembered my father crying, the only time I'd ever seen him cry. I remembered thinking my grandfather must have been very important for my father to cry like that. After the funeral, my father removed all the photos of my grandfather from our house. When I asked why, he said it was too painful to look at them, that we needed to move forward. I had 3 photos left. One I kept in my wallet. My grandfather holding me as a baby, both of us squinting in the sun. In that photo, his eyes were the same color as mine. Over the years, I'd asked my father about my grandfather maybe a dozen times. He'd give me one-sentence answers and then change the subject. He was a good man. He worked hard. He wanted the best for us. Then the conversation would shift to something else, and I'd let it go. I didn't understand why my father couldn't talk about him. I thought it was grief. Now, standing in the bridal suite on March 7th, 2026, I understood it was something else entirely. The morning of my wedding, I woke up at 6. Sloane was already awake in the hotel room we'd shared, sitting by the window with her coffee, scrolling through her phone. "Big day," she said, not looking up. "Yeah." "You nervous?" "About marrying Caleb?" "No." "About Dad showing up and ruining it?" "Yes." She finally looked at me. Sloane is 4 years older than me, 33 to my 29. She's always been the one our father approved of. She went to Duke because he wanted her to. She married Preston Aldridge III, whose family has old money in Charleston, because Preston fit the profile of what a Van Tassel daughter should marry. She took a CFO position at a tech startup because my father had made the connections. I'd gone to UNC and majored in nonprofit management. I'd chosen a career that would never make me wealthy. I'd fallen in love with a man who worked with his hands. In my father's eyes, Sloane had done everything right. I had done everything wrong. "He'll come around," Sloane said, but her voice was uncertain. "He's stubborn. But he won't actually miss walking you down the aisle. That would be too publicly humiliating for him." I wanted to believe her. I'd been telling myself the same thing for weeks. At noon, I got a text from my father. We need to talk before the ceremony. Bridal suite 130. I showed Sloane the text. She read it and her face tightened. Maybe it's good news. Maybe he wants to apologize. Or maybe he wants one last chance to talk me out of it. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock at Grace Lutheran Church. I'd paid for the wedding myself. $18,000 that wiped out my savings. My father had refused to contribute even $1, which was unusual. He'd paid over $100,000 for Sloane's wedding in Charleston in 2019. Full orchestra, 300 guests, reception at a historic plantation venue. For my wedding, I got silence and a text message summons. I arrived at the church at 1:15. The coordinator met me at the side entrance and led me to the bridal suite, a small room with a couch, a mirror, and a window overlooking the parking lot. Sloane helped me into my dress. Ivory silk, simple lines, no train. I'd bought it off the rack and had it altered. My bouquet was white roses and eucalyptus, arranged by Caleb's mother. At 1:25, Sloane stepped into the hallway. I'll give you privacy when Dad gets here. At 1:30 exactly, my father knocked. Come in. He stepped inside. He was wearing a charcoal suit, pale blue tie, his usual armor. His face was set in that expression I'd learned to read over the years, the one that meant he'd already made up his mind and nothing I said would change it. He didn't sit down, didn't ask how I was feeling, just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at me the way a lawyer looks at a contract he's about to reject. Junita, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to really hear me. I waited. This is a mistake. Caleb Hartley is not the man you should build a life with. He doesn't have the education, the connections, or the financial stability to give you the future you deserve. You're too young to see it now, but you'll regret this. My hands were shaking. I gripped my bouquet tighter. I love him, Dad. Love isn't enough. Your grandfather built a business from nothing. I built a law firm from nothing. We worked our whole lives so you and your sister would have opportunities. You're throwing that away for a man who fixes air conditioners. He owns a company with 28 employees. He just signed a $520,000 contract with a hospital system. He's not fixing air conditioners. He's running a successful business. My father's jaw tightened. If you marry him, I will not walk you down that aisle. I refuse to let you embarrass the entire Van Tassel name. The room went silent except for the sound of the organ music filtering in from the sanctuary. 200 guests. They were already seated, waiting. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. He didn't love me the way a father should love a daughter. He loved the idea of who he wanted me to be. And when I refused to become that person, I stopped being valuable to him. Then don't, I said quietly. He blinked. What? Don't walk me down the aisle, I'll do it myself. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Then it was gone. You'll regret this, he said. He turned and walked out. The door slammed shut behind him with a sound that echoed in the small room. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard them fade, heard the heavy church door open and close. He was gone. Sloane appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Junie. He left. I know. I saw him. He got in his car and drove away. I sat down on the couch, still holding my bouquet. The silk of my dress felt suddenly too heavy. My hands had stopped shaking and gone numb. 200 people were sitting in that sanctuary. My friends, Caleb's family, colleagues from work, distant cousins. They'd driven hours to be here. They'd brought gifts. They were waiting for a ceremony that was supposed to start in 20 minutes, and I had no one to walk me down the aisle. The wedding coordinator knocked softly. Miss Van Tassel, is everything all right? We're about 10 minutes to start time. Sloane went to the door, said something I couldn't hear, then closed it again. What do you want to do? She asked. I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know. All my life, I'd been taught that family was supposed to show up. That blood meant something. That fathers protected their daughters, especially on days like this. My father had just proven that was a lie. I sat there for 6 minutes in complete silence. The organist kept playing the same hymn on loop. I could hear it through the walls. Be thou my vision, over and over. The sound started to feel like a countdown. Then someone knocked. Not the coordinator's gentle tap, a firmer knock. Sloane opened the door. It was Reverend Coleman, the pastor. He was 61, silver-haired, kind-faced. He'd counseled Caleb and me through our premarital sessions. He knew my father had issues with the marriage, but I'd downplayed how bad it was. Junita, sweetheart, he said gently. I don't want to add to your stress, but there's someone here who insists he knows you. He arrived a few minutes ago in a wheelchair. There's a woman with him named Patricia. He called you Junibug. The world tilted. Junibug. Nobody had called me that since I was 5 years old. Since before my grandfather died. He says he's your grandfather. Reverend Coleman continued, his voice uncertain. He says he's been waiting 24 years for this. My grandfather died in 2002. I was at his memorial service. I watched my father cry. I saw the urn. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady. Where is he? At the side entrance, with the woman, Patricia. And there's a nurse with them, too. Beverly, I think she said. I walked past Reverend Coleman, past Sloane, down the hallway toward the side entrance. My dress rustled against the carpet. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. The side door was propped open. Afternoon light streamed in. And there, in the doorway, was a man in a wheelchair. He was old. 82, I would learn later. His hands tremored on the armrests. He wore a cardigan over a button-down shirt, dress pants, shoes that looked like they'd been polished that morning. His hair was white and thin, but his eyes were the same color as mine, the same color as the man in the photo I kept in my wallet. I stopped walking, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He was crying. Silently, the way old men cry when they've been holding something in for too long. Junibug, he said, his voice shaking. You're so... I knew your mama's eyes. You have her eyes. I thought I'd never. Your father told me you forgot. That you didn't want to know me. I knelt down in my wedding dress. The ivory silk pooled on the floor around me. I reached out and touched his hand. His skin was warm, papery, real. We buried you, I whispered. I was at your funeral. I watched my father cry. A woman standing behind the wheelchair stepped forward. She was in her 50s, brown hair, nervous energy. I'm Patricia Holbrook. I'm your grandfather's cousin. Well, second cousin. I live in Charlottesville. This is going to sound insane, but your grandfather has been alive this whole time. He's been in a nursing home in Virginia, near Wytheville, for 24 years. The words didn't make sense. I looked at my grandfather. He was nodding, tears streaming down his face. He made me sign papers. My grandfather said, his voice rough and unclear, the speech of someone whose brain had been damaged and partially healed. After the stroke, I couldn't read right. He said it was for protection, for you girls, but then they took me away, and nobody came. I thought you didn't want me. Another woman stepped forward, younger, maybe 34, wearing scrubs. I'm Beverly Walsh. I'm a nurse at Greenwood Extended Care Facility where Mr. Van Tassel has been living. I found out about your wedding 3 weeks ago. I Googled his name and saw an announcement that mentioned you. granddaughter of the late Raymond Van Tassel. But he's not late. He's been in room 14 for 24 years. Your father told the facility he had no family who could visit. He paid cash. Under the table. No insurance. No paper trail. Just cash. Every month. To keep him hidden. My brain was trying to process this and failing. My grandfather was dead. My father cried at his funeral. There was an urn. There was grief. You don't fake grief like that. Patricia knelt beside me. Your grandfather listed me as emergency contact back in 2001, before his stroke. After 2002, I could never reach him. The facility said he didn't want contact. I thought he'd moved on from our side of the family. I didn't know Vincent had changed everything. Not until Beverly found my name on the original admission form and called me. We came as fast as we could. I looked at Beverly. How did you get his records? Your grandfather requested them. That's his legal right. Patients can access their own medical records. I helped him get copies. And when I realized what was happening, I documented everything I saw. North Carolina law says I have a duty to report suspected elder abuse. She held up a manila folder. These aren't stolen records. They're evidence. My grandfather reached out and took my hand. His grip was weak, but deliberate. I have something for you, he said. He reached into his cardigan pocket with his trembling hand and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. I unfolded it carefully. It was a nursing home admission form. Greenwood Extended Care Facility. Date: April 12, 2002. Patient: Raymond Van Tassel. Admitted by Vincent Van Tassel, son and legal guardian. There was a section marked Family Contact Information. It read, Patient has no reachable family. Son is sole contact. My father's signature was at the bottom. Blue ink, bold and clear. The ceremony was supposed to start in 8 minutes. 200 people were waiting. The organist was still playing, and the man who was supposed to walk me down the aisle had just driven away. But the man who should have walked me down the aisle 24 years ago, the man my father had erased, hidden, buried while still alive, was here now. I looked at my grandfather. Can you do this? Can you give me away? He nodded, crying harder now. I was supposed to. 24 years ago. Before he took everything. Let me finish what he stole. Caleb appeared at the side entrance. He must have heard the commotion. He saw my grandfather, saw my face, saw the admission form in my hand. Uni. He knelt beside me. Whatever this is, whoever this is, you're not alone. If you want to walk down that aisle with him, we walk. If you want to stop everything and figure this out, we stop. But you don't have to choose between your wedding and the truth. We'll have both. I looked at my grandfather. At this man I'd mourned when I was 5 years old. This man who'd been alive the whole time, 300 miles away, thinking his family had forgotten him. Okay, I said. Okay. Let's do this. Patricia positioned herself behind the wheelchair. Beverly stayed close, protective. Reverend Coleman went back to the sanctuary to tell the organist we were ready. The processional music started. Canon in D. The double doors to the sanctuary opened. My grandfather's wheelchair was beside me. I stood next to him, my hand on his shoulder. Patricia pushed from behind. Every head turned. I saw it happen in real time, the collective intake of breath, the gasps, the whispers starting like wildfire. In the third row, Lawrence Mitchell, 76 years old, former president of the Raleigh Chamber of Commerce, half stood from his seat. His mouth opened. That's Ray Van Tassel, I heard him whisper to his wife. Jesus Christ, that's Ray. We walked slowly. The wheelchair wheels made a soft, rhythmic sound on the carpet. I kept my hand on my grandfather's shoulder, feeling the tremor in his frame, the decades of absence between then and now. In the front row, Sloane sat frozen. Her face had gone white. Preston had to grip her arm to keep her from standing up. We reached the front of the sanctuary. Reverend Coleman stood at the altar. Caleb stood beside him, his eyes on mine, his face steady. Reverend Coleman improvised beautifully. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" My grandfather's voice shook, but it was clear enough for everyone to hear. "I do." Her grandfather, as I should have done when she was 5 years old, before I was taken. The gasps were louder now. Whispers swept through the sanctuary like wind through trees. My grandfather reached out and took my hand. Then he took Caleb's hand. He held them both, tremoring, and brought them together. "You take care of my Junie bug," he said to Caleb. "You're the man her father should have been." I glanced at the front row, at the empty chair where my father should have been sitting. His absence wasn't neutral anymore. It was damning. Patricia wheeled my grandfather to a seat in the front row, right where my father should have been. The ceremony proceeded. Caleb's vows included a line about family you choose and being there when others walk away. His voice broke on the last phrase. He was looking at me, but he was also looking at my grandfather. When it was my turn, I said the vows I'd written weeks ago. I promise to be the person who stays, who doesn't condition love on your job title or your bank account, or whether you meet someone else's definition of worthy. I choose you. I will always choose you. I was crying. My grandfather was crying silently in the front row. Half the congregation was crying. Reverend Coleman pronounced us married. Caleb kissed me. We turned to face the congregation. 200 faces looked back at us. Most of them were staring at my grandfather. Some of the older guests looked like they'd seen a ghost. Because they had. As we walked back up the aisle, Sloane reached out and grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. Her face was bone white. Preston was trying to calm her, but she wasn't listening. "What the fuck is happening?" she hissed. "We buried him, Junie. We buried him. I was 9. I remember. Dad cried at the memorial service. There was an urn. You can't fake grief like that. What is happening?" "Reception," I said over my shoulder. 30 minutes. I'll explain everything I know." Outside the church, the photographer tried to organize family photos. Someone asked, "Should we wait for the father of the bride?" I looked at the photographer. My voice was ice cold and clear. "My grandfather will be in the photos. That's all the family I need." The reception was at the Oakwood Estate, a historic venue 15 minutes from the church. By the time we arrived, the whispers had already started to spread. I saw it in clusters of guests, heads bent together, phones out. Someone was Googling Raymond Van Tassel Raleigh NC. Someone else was searching for obituaries from 2002. My grandfather sat at the head table between Caleb and me. My father's chair had been removed. Sloane and Preston sat at the other end, both of them looking shell-shocked. During cocktail hour, an elderly man approached our table. Lawrence Mitchell, the same man who'd recognized my grandfather at the church. He walked slowly, his champagne glass trembling in his hand. "Ray?" he said. "Ray Van Tassel?" But Vincent said, "The memorial service, in 2002. I sent flowers. He said you'd died peacefully. Closed cremation. Very private." My grandfather's voice was weak but steady. "There was no body in that casket, Lawrence. There was never a body. I've been in Virginia. All this time." Lawrence's champagne glass slipped from his hand. He caught it at the last second. "Vincent held a memorial service. He cried during the eulogy. I've never seen him cry before or since. How do you fake that?" I looked at Lawrence. "You don't fake it. You convince yourself you're doing the right thing, and then you live with the lie long enough that it becomes truth." Lawrence looked at me. "Does Vincent know he's here?" "Vincent knows exactly what he did. And now everyone else will too. Lawrence walked away slowly, like a man whose understanding of reality had just been rewritten. Other guests from my grandfather's generation approached throughout the hour. People who'd served on the Chamber of Commerce with him in the 90s. People who'd bought from Van Tassel Industrial Supply before he sold it in 2001. Every single one of them had the same reaction: shock, disbelief, and then anger as the implications settled in. Sloane pulled me into the bride's preparation room away from the guests. She was shaking. "I need you to explain this to me right now. That man out there is our grandfather." "No. Our grandfather died. I was 9 years old. I remember sitting in that room. I remember the urn. I remember Dad standing at the podium and crying. You can't fake that. You can't fake grief like that." I showed her the admission form my grandfather had given me. "Read it." Her hands trembled as she took the paper. She read it once, twice. Her face went from white to gray. "This doesn't make sense. Why would Dad? What could possibly?" "I don't know yet. But Beverly, the nurse who found him, brought documents. We're going to find out tonight." Beverly Walsh appeared in the doorway, her manila folder in hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you need to see these before dinner starts." She opened the folder on a side table. Inside were photocopies, lots of them, nursing home bills, 24 years worth. All paid in cash, no insurance trail. Amount, $3,800 per month. I did the math quickly. 3,800 times 12 months, times 24 years. Over $1 million. "Where did he get that kind of cash?" Sloane whispered. "Not from his salary, not without someone noticing. Medical records showing my grandfather's condition. The stroke in February 2002. Severe, yes. But by 2004, his cognitive function had largely returned. He wasn't incompetent. He knew who he was. He knew his family. He could communicate." Notes from the facility director. Vincent visited twice a year. Always alone. Always told the staff that Raymond didn't want family contact, that it was too painful for him. Photocopies of checks. Not recent ones. These were older, from 2002 to 2008, before my father switched to cash. Each one drawn on an account I didn't recognize. The signature was my father's, but the account name was Van Tassel Family Trust. "What is the Van Tassel Family Trust?" I asked. Beverly pulled out another document. This one looked official, notarized, dated August 2001. "Your grandfather sold his business, Van Tassel Industrial Supply, in 2001 for $12 million. After taxes and fees, he had about $8.5 million left. He established this trust for his family. $1.2 million for you, $1.2 million for your sister. The rest was supposed to be for his care, and then the estate." I stared at the document. I'd never heard of this trust. My father had never mentioned it. Sloane was reading over my shoulder. She'd gone very still. "I accessed my portion in 2019, when I got married. Vincent showed me statements. He said after taxes and fees, I had about $480,000. Beverly pointed to a clause in the trust document. "According to this, you should have had $1.2 million. Minimum. Probably closer to $1.6 million with 7 years of growth." The math was simple. Devastating. Sloane had lost over $1 million. "He stole from me," Sloane whispered. "He stole from me and gave me my own money and made me thank him for it." Dinner was served. The best man gave a toast. It was sweet and normal, and completely at odds with what was happening at the head table. Then the DJ announced Sloane for the maid of honor toast. She stood. Her champagne glass was shaking in her hand. She started with standard memories. Growing up together. Childhood stories. Her voice was tight but controlled. Then it changed. My sister has always been the brave one. Today I watched her walk down the aisle with our grandfather, a man I thought died when I was 9, a man who has been alive this whole time. She paused. Her eyes were glassy with tears she wasn't letting fall. Uni, you taught me something today. You taught me that truth doesn't stay buried, even when someone powerful tries to hide it for decades. She raised her glass. To my sister, who taught me today that truth doesn't stay buried, even when someone spends 2 decades trying to hide it. And to our grandfather, who we should have had at every family dinner for the last 24 years, welcome home. The guests applauded, confused, uncertain, murmurs spreading. Preston leaned over to Sloane and whispered something. She shook her head, set her jaw. We moved to a private room off the reception hall. Junita, Caleb, Sloane, Preston, Raymond, Patricia, Beverly. 7 people. 1 manila folder. 24 years of lies about to come apart. My grandfather produced a second folder from his wheelchair bag. He'd been carrying it this whole time. Documents he'd kept for 24 years, the originals. First, the trust agreement from 2001. It showed exactly what Beverly had said. $8.5 million, $1.2 million each for Junita and Sloane, access at marriage, age 35, or first child. The rest for Raymond's care and eventual estate. Vincent Van Tassel named as trustee. The terms were crystal clear, transparent. The girls get their portions when triggered. Raymond's care gets funded appropriately. Simple. I put him in charge because he was my son, my grandfather said, his voice breaking. Because I thought he understood what it meant to protect family. I built that money from nothing. I wanted it to keep you both safe. Instead, he used it to bury me. Preston took the trust document. He's an investment banker. He understands trusts. He started reading through the statements Vincent had provided to Sloane in 2019. His face darkened. This doesn't add up. He pulled out his phone, opened a calculator app, started running numbers. The trust shows management fees of 2.5% annually. That's legal, but it's high. Industry standard is 0.5 to 1%. Over 24 years if you calculate what he took in fees alone. Preston's fingers moved across his screen. He took over $5 million in fees. He kept calculating. Then there are unexplained estate settlement costs and administrative expenses that aren't detailed. And look at this, loans taken from the trust principal for business development. $1.8 million between 2008 and 2015. Preston looked up. If you calculate what the trust should be worth right now with normal conservative growth from 2001 to now, even with your portions paid out, you're looking at 15 to 18 million. He's showing 2.3 million remaining. The silence in the room was absolute. He didn't just take fees, Preston said quietly. He looted it. Sloane's voice was dead. He paid for my wedding from the trust, told me it was his gift. It was my own money. He stole from me and gave it back, and called it generosity. My grandfather pulled out another document. This one made my hands shake when I saw it. A durable power of attorney. Healthcare and financial. Dated April 2002, 3 weeks after my grandfather's stroke. My grandfather's signature was at the bottom. Crooked. Shaky. Barely legible. Nothing like the bold signature on the trust document from 2001. I couldn't see right after the stroke, my grandfather said. Words were jumbled. He said, Dad, just sign here. It's temporary, until you're better. I trusted him. He was my son. Why wouldn't I trust my son? Beverly spoke quietly. That's the signature of someone who didn't understand what they were signing. That's exploitation of diminished capacity. That's how he got away with it. I looked at the trust document again. At the clause that said beneficiaries get access at marriage. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. He didn't walk out because Caleb works in HVAC, I said slowly. He walked out because getting married gives me access to the trust. Sloane triggered hers in 2019, but she didn't question the numbers because she trusted Dad. But I would have. I've worked in nonprofit finance for 6 years. I know how to read financial statements. I would have audited it. I would have asked questions. Caleb nodded. He was willing to abandon you on your wedding day, publicly humiliate you, leave you standing alone, all to avoid being caught. That's how much the money mattered. More than you. More than his father. More than anything. The room was silent. Then Sloane spoke. Her voice was small and lost. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I thought you were being difficult. I thought Dad was just traditional. I didn't know he was burying people. Literally burying people. Word spread through the reception like contagion. Phones glowing across the hall. Screenshots being taken. Messages being sent. Raymond Van Tassel alive? Thought he died 2002? Vincent said cremation. 3 of my father's law partners were at the reception. Mitchell Reed, the senior partner, approached our table during dinner. He was 64, gray-haired, carried himself with the careful precision of someone who'd spent 40 years managing risk. Ms. Van Tassel, Junita, I need to speak with you. Privately, if possible. We stepped into a side alcove. Caleb came with me. Is it true? Mitchell asked. What people are saying? Raymond is alive? Vincent has been lying for 24 years? I showed him the admission form, the nursing home documents, the trust statements. His face went ashen. If what you're telling me is accurate, your father won't just face criminal charges, he'll lose his license to practice law. Everything he's built professionally will be gone. Are you prepared for that? I looked at Mitchell Reed. This man had been my father's partner for 18 years. They'd built the firm together. And now, I was about to destroy it. Mr. Reed, my grandfather spent 24 years in a nursing home because my father was willing to bury him alive to steal his money. I don't care what it costs Vincent. I care about what it cost Grandpa Ray. Mitchell pulled out a business card, pressed it into my hand. Call me Monday. We'll need to make this right. He walked away, already pulling out his phone. A local reporter approached me during the cake cutting. Amanda Price, 38, Raleigh Tribune. She was a friend of Caleb's mother, invited to the wedding as a guest, not as press. But she was press now. Junita, I've been hearing things, and I just spoke to Mr. Van Tassel, your grandfather. He told me. She paused. This is a story, a major story. Elder abuse, trust fraud, a prominent attorney. Can I interview him on the record? I looked at my grandfather. He'd overheard. He nodded. Let everyone know, he said to Amanda. What Vincent did. It shouldn't stay quiet. Other families need to know this can happen. Amanda pulled out her phone, hit record. The red light blinked. Mr. Van Tassel, on the record. Where have you been for the last 24 years? Greenwood Extended Care Facility. Room 14, 285 miles from my family. My son put me there and told everyone I was dead. I've been alive this whole time, wondering why no one came. Amanda's face was somber. This story will break Monday morning. Front page. Mr. Van Tassel, are you ready for that? My grandfather looked at me, at Sloane, at our joined hands. I've been ready for 24 years. At 8:45, a guest near the window saw a black Mercedes pull into the parking lot. Vincent's here. The words rippled through the reception hall. Conversations stopped. People turned toward the entrance. My father's car. I stood. Sloane joined me. We moved toward the entrance together, side by side. Caleb stepped to my left. Preston to Sloane's right. My grandfather in his wheelchair. Patricia behind him, facing the doors. 200 people watching. The double glass doors opened. My father stepped inside. He'd changed clothes. No longer in wedding attire. Dark slacks, a button-down shirt, no tie. He looked like he'd been home, debating whether to come back. He saw my grandfather and froze. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then my father walked forward. Slowly. His eyes were on my grandfather, not on me. His expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the calculation happening behind it. Dad. His voice was measured. I didn't expect to see you here. How did you... Who brought you? My grandfather's voice was stronger than it had been all day. My granddaughter's nurse, and a cousin you tried to cut off, and a reporter who's very interested in where I've been for 24 years. Shall we talk about that, Vincent? My father's jaw tightened. He looked around the room, saw the faces watching him, saw Mitchell Reed standing near the bar with his phone in his hand, saw Amanda Price with her recording device. He was cornered. This is a family matter, he said carefully. It's not appropriate to discuss here. You made it public when you walked out of my wedding in front of 200 guests, I said. My voice was cold, steady. You made it public when you lied about Grandpa Ray being dead for 24 years. You made it public when you stole millions from a trust meant for his care and our future. So no, Dad, we're going to discuss it right here, right now. He tried to pivot, tried to explain. You were incompetent after the stroke. I had to protect you. The facility was for your safety. I visited you. You know I did. I cut him off. You visited twice a year, alone, to make sure the facility staff stayed quiet, to maintain control. I managed the trust professionally. The fees were standard. You don't understand finance, Junita. 2.5% annually for 24 years on an $8.5 million trust is not standard. It's theft. And hiding your father in a nursing home while claiming he's dead is not complicated. It's criminal. Sloane stepped forward. Her voice was quiet but fierce. You stole from me too, Dad. You gave me my own money and made me thank you for it. How do you justify that? My father tried to separate us, addressed Sloane as, You've always been reasonable. Don't let your sister poison you against me. Sloane didn't take the bait. We're not a family, Dad. Families don't bury each other alive. My father's face reddened. If you pursue this, you'll destroy everything. My career, the firm, your inheritance, the family name. Is that what you want? Before I could answer, my grandfather spoke. I gave you everything, Vincent. His voice was soft, sad, bone-tired. I built the business so you'd have security, put you through law school, trusted you with everything I had. And when I got sick, when I needed you most, you made me disappear. I've spent 24 years wondering what I did wrong. But I didn't do anything wrong. You did. My father looked at his father, really looked at him. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Shame, maybe. Or fear. Then it was gone. You don't understand what it took to build what I built, the sacrifices, the image I had to maintain. You worked with your hands. You were respected, but you were never more than that. I had to be more. And she, he gestured at me, was throwing it all away for a man who works in the trades, just like you. The truth came out so casually, so matter of fact. My father was ashamed of where he came from, ashamed of his father. And when I chose Caleb, I reminded him of that shame. So he did to me what he'd done to his father. He tried to make me disappear. My grandfather's voice was quiet. I forgave you for a lot of things, Vincent. For being cold. For being ambitious. For caring more about status than people. But this? Making your daughters think I was dead? Taking their inheritance? letting me sit in a room for 2 decades thinking my family forgot me. There's no forgiveness for that. Not from me. Not from God. Not from anyone. My father tried to leave, turned toward the door. Mitchell Reed stepped in front of it. Vincent, as your law partner, I strongly advise you to stay and answer these allegations, because come Monday morning, if you don't, I will. My father stood there, trapped between the door and 200 witnesses, between his past and his future, between the lie he'd built and the truth that was about to bury him. He looked at me one last time. "You'll regret this," he said. "No," I said quietly. "I really won't." He pushed past Mitchell and walked out. The reception continued, but it wasn't really a reception anymore. It was a reckoning. By 10:30, most of the guests had left. My grandfather was exhausted. Patricia and Beverly helped him into their car for the drive to my house, where Caleb and I had prepared the downstairs guest room. Sloan and Preston committed to joint legal action. "We're going to audit the entire trust," Preston said. "Forensic accountant, every penny traced, and we're pressing charges, together." Monday, March 10th, the story broke. Front page of the Raleigh Tribune. Prominent attorney accused of faking father's death. Trust fraud. My father's phone rang constantly. The law firm held an emergency meeting. The North Carolina State Bar opened an investigation. Tuesday, March 11th, the police contacted me for a statement. The DA's office began reviewing the case for criminal charges: elder abuse, theft, fraud, exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Wednesday, March 12th, my father was suspended from practice pending investigation. By late March, the forensic accountant confirmed what Preston had calculated. The trust should have been worth over $15 million. It showed $2.3 million. My father had systematically drained it over 24 years. In April, the DA filed charges. Vincent Van Tassel, 58, managing partner at Van Tassel and Reed, was indicted on 4 felonies. His attorney made a settlement offer: $2 million to me, $2 million to Sloan, $3 million to my grandfather. Public admission of mismanagement. No jail time. I called Sloan. We called my grandfather. The decision had to be unanimous. My grandfather spoke first. "I just want to be with family. I don't need revenge." Sloan was quiet for a long time. "I want him to face consequences. But Grandpa's peace matters more than my anger." Then it was my turn. I thought about my wedding day, about standing in that bridal suite, alone, abandoned, about my grandfather wheeling down the aisle beside me, about Sloan kneeling next to his wheelchair, both of us holding his hands, about truth breaking through 24 years of silence. "No," I said. "We're not taking the settlement." "Junie," Sloan started, "because this isn't about money. It's about the 24 years Grandpa Ray lost. The childhood memories I should have had with him. The sister I barely knew because Dad kept us divided. You can't buy that back. And other families need to see that this has consequences. Real consequences. We're going to trial." The trial date was set for September. I won't tell you how it ended, because that's not really what this story is about. This story is about the day I learned that family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the people who show up when everyone else walks away. My grandfather lives with Caleb and me now. The downstairs guest room is his. We have dinner together every night. Sloan visits every Sunday with her daughter, Rayanne, named after Raymond. She was born in August. I'm pregnant now, due in spring of next year. My grandfather cries every time he feels the baby kick. Says he gets to watch her grow up. Says he won't miss another moment. Sometimes I watch the wedding video. The moment my grandfather wheeled down that aisle beside me, the gasps from the congregation, the look on Caleb's face when he realized what was happening. My father's empty chair is visible in every shot. His absence is the loudest part of the whole day. People ask if I regret how my wedding went, if I wish my father had stayed, if I wish I'd taken the settlement and kept things quiet. I tell them, I got married. I got my grandfather back. And I learned exactly who my father was. Some people call that a disaster. I call it the truth. And truth, even when it costs everything, is worth it. On Saturday afternoons, my grandfather teaches me things he would have taught me if he'd been there all along. How to fix a leaky faucet, how to change a tire, how to use a level properly. Last week he pulled out a coffee can from his closet. Inside were bolts and washers, different sizes, different metals. For when the baby comes, he said, we'll teach her to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like I taught you. I held one of the bolts in my hand. Cold metal. Smooth threading. A small thing. Ordinary. But when my grandfather's trembling hand closed over mine, guiding it, it felt like everything. Like all the years we lost, condensed into this one moment. Like a promise kept, 24 years late but kept all the same.